Hello and welcome back. We are discussing Chapter 6%, Lesson 4% of Change, and this is the guided practice. So let's look at number 1. Number 1 states that the Big Bike Shop has inline skates on sale for 15% off the regular price. A pair of inline skates usually costs $89. Find the amount of the discount and the sale price. So there's two things we need to find. The amount of the discount and the sale price. Now, to do that, we're going to take the original cost, which is $89, and we're going to multiply that by this percentage. This is the percentage off in the form of a decimal. So remember, when we have 15%, we can change that to a decimal by moving the decimal places over 2 places to the left. So we're going to multiply it by 0.15, okay? And that's going to give us the amount of the discount. So I'm just going to go over here and go 89 times 0.15. 5 times 9 is 45. I'm going to write the 5, carry the 4. 5 times 8 is 40, plus 4 is 44. I'm going to the tens place, so I'm going to write a 0. 1 times 9 is 9, 1 times 8 is 8, and then I add. 5 plus 0 is 5, 4 plus 9 is 13. Write the 1, carry the, write 13, write the 3, carry the 1. 8 plus 4 is 12, plus 1 is 13. And then since there are decimals, I need to figure out how many decimal places are in the problem, and there's 1, 2. That means my answer also has to have 2 decimal places. So it is equal to a $13.35 discount. Okay, so that is the discount. If I want to find the sale price, I'm going to take the original amount and then subtract the discount. So I'm going to take the original amount over here, $89, and subtract $13.35. Remember, whenever you're subtracting decimals, you need to line up the decimal places. So the 0 is not big enough, so I need to borrow from the 9, making that an 8. And that would make this a 9 and this a 10. 10 take away 5 is 5. 9 take away 3 is 6. I bring down the decimal place. 8 take away 3 is 5, and 8 take away 1 is 7. So the sale price equals $75.65. That is the sale price. So we have the discount and the sale price. That's how those problems work. So now we're going to move on to problem 2. Problem 2 states, in 1935, there were 15,295 banks in the United States. In 2003, there were 9,182 banks. What is the percent of change? Is it a percent increase or decrease? So we're talking about a percent change. It gives us 2 values. The first thing we have to do is find the amount of change. So I'm going to subtract 15,295 minus 9,182. I need to find the amount of change. 5 take away 2 is 3. 9 take away 8 is 1. 2 take away 1 is 1. And then I need to borrow, making that a 0, and then 15. 15 take away 9 is 6. So the amount of change is 6,113 over the original amount, which was 15,295, and then we multiply that by 100. Now these are really big numbers, so I'm going to go ahead and take out my calculator and use my calculator for this problem. So I'm going to go 6,113 divided by 15,295 and enter. So I end up with this number right here. And when I multiply that, I'm going to take that and multiply that by 100, and it says answer times 100. I end up with 39.96, and I'm just going to round that to 40. So all of this ends up equaling 40, and remember the answer is 40%. So this is a 40%. Now is the number, we started here, is the number getting bigger or is the number getting smaller? If we start here at 15,000 and we end with 9,000, it's definitely getting smaller. So that represents a 40% decrease. So that is the answer to problem number 2. Okay, let's go ahead and do problem number 3 together. Problem number 3 states a jewelry store is having a going out of business sale. All merchandise is marked 40% off the regular price. The regular price of a watch is $59.95. Find the amount of the discount and the sale price. So we have to do 2 things. We have to find the amount of the discount, and we have to find the sale price. So to find the amount of the discount, what we do is we take the total, the regular price, which was $59.95, and we multiply that by 40% in the form of a decimal. So we have 40% to change 40% to a decimal. We move it over 2 places to the left. And so that means we end up with 0.4. So we're going to multiply it by 0.4. So I'm just going to go ahead and do that on the side. $59.95 times 0.4. 4 times 5 is 20. Write a 0, carry the 2. 4 times 9 is 36, plus 2 is 38. Write the 8, carry the 3. 4 times 9 is 36, plus 3 would be 39. Write the 9, carry the 3. 4 times 5 is 20, plus 3 would be 23. And since I'm multiplying decimals, I need to count up the decimal places. So this would be 1, 2, 3. So my answer needs to have 3 decimal places. 1, 2, 3. So the amount of the discount would be $23.98 discount. Now, if I wanted to determine the sale price, what I do is I take the original amount, $59.95, and I subtract the discount. So I'm going to go ahead and do that right here. $59.95 subtracted by the $23.98 discount. The 5 is not big enough, so I need to borrow from the 9, making that an 8. 15 take away 8 is 7. I need to borrow from the 9, making that an 8, but this is 18. 18 take away 9 is 9. I drop down the decimal. 8 take away 3 is 5, and then 5 take away 2 is 3. So the sale price would end up being $35.97 would equal the sale price. Okay. The last one we're going to do together for right now is problem 4. It says last year there were 381 students at Woodlands Middle School. This year there are 419 students. What is the percent of change? Is it a percent increase or a percent decrease? So whenever we're dealing with these type of problems, we need to determine the amount of change first. So I'm going to figure out what the difference is between 419 and 381. So I'm going to go over here, 419 minus 381, and figure out what the amount of change is. 9 take away 1 is 8. The 1 is not big enough, so I need to borrow from the 4, making that a 3. And then I have 11 take away 8, which is 3. So that means the amount of change is 38 over the original amount of students, which was 381, we're going to multiply that by 100 and determine what our result is. Now with this one, there's not a whole lot of easy simplification going on, so I'm just going to go ahead and use my calculator to determine the answer. So I'm going to go 38 divided by 381 and hit enter. And that enters this number, and then I'm going to multiply that answer by 100. And I end up with 9.97. If I rounded that, that would be 10. So the answer equals a 10%. And then we just need to determine, is this it's a 10% change. We look at what we started with. Is the number getting bigger or smaller? And we started with 381, and the number is getting bigger, so that would represent a 10% increase. All right. So now we're going to go on to the next page, which has 5, 6, 7, and 8. And I want you to go ahead and work on these problems on your own. So now it's time for you to pause, work on 5, 6, 7, and 8. When you get done with those, press play and we'll go over the answers. All right, see you in a bit. See you in a bit. Okay, we're back with problem 5. Let's go ahead and see how you did. We have Chandra scored 75 on her first math test. She scored 20% higher on her next math test. What did she score on the second test? So we're going to start with the original amount, which is 75. And what we're going to do is we're going to multiply it by 20% in the form of a decimal. So 20% in the form of a decimal. We change this to a decimal by moving it over 2 places to the left. So that ends up being 0.2. So we're going to multiply this by 0.2 and figure out what that result is. Now this is something I can easily do without a calculator, so I'm not going to use a calculator. 75 times 0.2. 2 times 5 is 10. Write the 0, carry the 1. 2 times 7 is 14, plus 1 is 15. I'm multiplying decimals, so I have to count up the decimal places. There's 1, which means my answer is also going to have 1 decimal place. So there you go. My answer is 15. Okay, so that is a 20% of 75. So she scored 20% higher. So what that means is we're going to take 75 and we're going to add it to the 15. That represents the 20% higher that she scored, and then we add these two numbers. 5 plus 5 is 10. Write the 0, carry the 1. 1 plus 7 is 8, plus 1 is 9. So she scored a 90% on her second test. That is the answer for that problem. Okay, let's move on to problem 6. Problem 6 says, last year, the average number of absences in school was 8 students per day. This year, the absentee rate is down to 6 students per day. What is the percent decrease in student absences this year? Well, the first thing we need to determine is what is the amount of change between 8 and 6. Now, this is a real tough one. The amount of change between 8 and 6 is 2. So it's going to be the amount of change over the original amount, which was 8. And we're going to multiply that by 100, okay? So the first thing we're going to do is reduce this amount. Is there a common number that is that goes into 2, which also goes into 8? The answer is yes. 2 goes into 2 one time, and 2 goes into 8 4 times. So we're left with 1/4 times 100. And we can easily do this problem. We're multiplying fractions. We always look to first cross cancel. Is there a common factor between 4 and 100? The answer is yes. 4 goes into 4 one time, and 4 goes into 100 25 times. Then we multiply across. 1 times 25 is 25, and 1 times 1 is 1. With 25 divided by 1 ends up being 25, and we put a percentage on. So that means it's a 25%, and then we need to go back to the problem. We started with 8, and then we went down to 6, that means that the number got smaller. So it is a 25% decrease. And that's the answer. If you got that one right, great job. Let's go ahead and move on to problem 7. Jim's gym, well, that's kind of fun to say, Jim's gym. Jim's gym had an income of $20,350 last month. The total increased by $2,000 this month. What was the percent increase to the nearest percent? Okay, so we need to figure out what was the amount of change. So last month he had an income of $20,350. The total increased by $2,000 this month. So that means this month his total would be $22,350, which is an increase of $2,000 on this. So we're going to take away his total increase from what he got the previous month, which was $20,350, and the answer should be pretty obvious. If we subtract, it's $2,000. So that is the amount of change, $2,000. And we're going to take that away from the original amount, which was $20,350. We're going to multiply that by 100 to find out the percent of change. So for this one, these are pretty big numbers. I'm going to go ahead and just use my calculator to determine the answer. So I'm going to turn it on. And clear it out. So I'm going to go 2,000 divided by 20,350. Hit enter. That's going to tell me the answer. And then I'm going to multiply that by 100. And I end up with 9.828. So I'm just going to call it 9.8. So it's a 9.8%. Is it an increase or decrease? Well, here we started with 20,000 and then the total increased by 2,000 the next month. So that means it's an increase. So the answer is a 9.8% increase. So if you got that one right, great job. Let's go on to problem 8. Problem 8 says during the 2002 to 2003 ski season, 171 million worth of snowboarding equipment was sold. That's a lot of equipment. Sales increased by about 15% during the 2003-2004 season. Okay, so sales increased the next year. About how much were sales of snowboarding equipment in the 2003 to 2004 season? Okay, so to do this problem, first we have to find how much it increased. To determine how much it increased, we're going to talk about what we started with. We started with 171, and then that increased by 15%. So we're going to figure out what a 15% increase of 171 is. To do that, first we have to convert 15% into a decimal. To convert that to a decimal, remember we just move it 2 places to the left. So it ends up being 0.15. So it's 171 multiplied by 0.15. And we can just go ahead and figure that out over here on the side. 171 times 0.15. 5 times 1 is 5. 5 times 7 is 35. Write the 5, carry the 3. 5 times 1 is 5 plus 3 is 8. I'm going to the tens place. I'm going to put a 0. 1 times 1 is 1, 1 times 7 is 7, 1 times 1 is 1, and then I add. 5 plus 0 is 5, 5 plus 1 is 6, 8 plus 7 is 15, write the 5, carry the 1, 1 plus 1 is 2. I'm multiplying decimals, so I need to go ahead and count up the number of decimal places in the problem. There's 1, 2, that means my answer needs to have 1, 2, which means that I put the decimal place right here between the 5 and the 6. So the amount of a 15% increase on 171 million would end up being 25.65 million. Okay, so that is the increase. The the increase. But to find the total amount, I need to add 171 to 25.65. So that's what I'm going to do for the total. 171 plus 25.65. I need to add a decimal there and 2 zeros. I add these. 0 plus 5 is 5. 0 plus 6 is 6. Bring down the decimal place. 1 plus 5 is 6. 7 plus 2 is 9. And then bring down the 1. So the total amount of sales in the 2003 and 2004 season was 196.65 million. So if you got that answer right, great job. Okay. We're going to go on to the next page. It's always good to practice these. So I want you to go ahead and try 9, 10, 11, 12, and 13 and 14 on your own. So go ahead and, where's my friend the pause dragon? Oh, here he is. Here's the pause dragon, reminding you to pause your device. Go ahead and work out these problems when you get done with 9 through 14. Press play and we'll go over the answers. All right, see you in a bit. Bye-bye. Not bye-bye. We'll just see you in a bit. See you in a bit. Okay, we're on to problem 9. Problem 9 states in 2002, the U.S. consumers bought about 8.1 million new cars. That's a lot of new cars. In 2003, that number decreased by about 6%. To the nearest 100,000 or 1/10 of a million, how many new cars did U.S. consumers buy in 2003? So they bought 8.1 million cars in 2002, and then it decreased by 6%. So we need to take the starting amount, which is 8.1, and multiply it by 6% in the form of a decimal. So if I have 6% and I want to change it to a decimal, I need to move it over 2 places to the left. Okay, there's nothing here, so I need to add a 0. So it's going to be 0.06. So I'm just going to go ahead and multiply those numbers off to the side. 8.1 times 0 times 0.06, multiplying. All right. So let's go for it. 6 times 1 is 6. 6 times 8 is 48. And that's it. 0 is just going to be 0. So I need to count up the decimal places. There's 1 decimal place here, another one, that's 2, and 3. So my answer has to have 3 decimal places. 1, 2, 3. So my decimal is going to go right here. So a 6% decrease of 8.1 ends up being 0.486. So if I want to find actually how many cars that is, I'm going to subtract this amount from what we started with, 8.1. So I'm going to go 8.1 subtracted from 0.486, and that's going to tell me the amount of cars that were sold in 2003. So I need to add zeros here, okay? Okay, this isn't big enough. I need to borrow. That's going to be 0. That's going to be a 9. That's going to be a 10. 10 take away 6 is 4. 9 take away 8 is 1. That 0 is not big enough. I need to borrow from that 8, making that a 7, making that a 10. 10 take away 4 is 6. I dropped the decimal. 7 take away 0 is 7. So I end up with 7.614 cars that were sold in 2003. But it says that I need to round it to the nearest 100,000 or 1/10 of a million. So here we're dealing with millions of cars, so 1/10 of a million would be here. 6, so that means I need to look at the next one, 1, and that doesn't round that up, it makes it stay the same. So that means that 7.6 million cars were sold in 2003. So that's the answer. So if you got that one right, great job. Okay, let's look at problem 10. Problem 10 states in Union County, Florida, the 1990 census listed the population at 10,252. The 2000 census listed the population at 13,442. What percent increase is this to the nearest 1/10 of a percent? All right, great. So when we're looking at this, we need to first, we have a starting and an ending value. We need to find the amount of change between these two values. So first I'm just going to go ahead and find the difference. So 13,442 subtracted from 10,252. Perfect. So 2 take away 2 is 0. 4 take away 5, I need to borrow from the 4, making that a 3, and this a 14. 14 take away 5 is 9. 3 take away 2 is 1. 3 take away 0 is 3, and then 1 take away 1 is 0. So the amount of change would be 3,190 over the original amount, and the original amount was here with 10,252, and then we're going to multiply that by 100. Now these are really big numbers, so I'm going to go ahead and use my calculator for this one. Turn it on, clear it out, and I have 3,190 divided by 10,252. Press enter, I get this answer. I'm going to multiply it by 100. And I end up with 31.1158793. Now, that's my percentage. It says, what percentage increases this to the nearest tenth? So the nearest tenth is 0.1. So I'm going to look at the one to the right of that, which would be 1. And that 1 doesn't round this 1 up. This 1 is going to remain the same. So our percentage would be of change would be 31.1%. Now, did the numbers get bigger or smaller? We started here at 10,000. We went up to 13,000. So that means it got bigger. So it's a 31.1% increase. So if you got that problem right, great job. Okay, let's go ahead and look at problems 11. Let's look at problem 11. It says the world production of motor vehicles increased from about 60 million in 2002 to 62 million in 2003. What was the percent increase to the nearest percent? All right, great. So we have 60 and 62. We need to find the amount of change. Okay, so if we go 62 minus 60, we determine that the amount of change is 2. So it's 2 over the original amount, which would be 60. We're going to multiply that by 100. Okay, if I reduce that, I know that 2 goes into both of these. 2 goes into 2 one time, 2 goes into 60 30 times. So I end up with 1 over 30 times 100. Okay, I can make this a fraction. If I wanted to cross cancel because I'm multiplying fractions, I know that 10 goes into both of these. 10 goes into 100 10 times, and 10 goes into 30 3 times. So then if I multiply across, I end up with 1 times 10, which is 10, 3 times 1, which is 3, 10 over 3. And I think I just have to do the long division on this one. So I'm going to go 10 divided by 3. 3 goes into 10 divided by 3. 3 goes into 10 3 times. 3 times 3 is 9. And there is 10 take away 9 is 1. I'm going to add the decimal, add a 0, drop it like it's hot. 3 goes into 10 3 times. 3 times 9. 3 times 3 is 9. And I think that we are establishing a pattern. So this is going to be a repeating 3.33333%. Okay? And it says, what was the percent increase to the nearest percent? Well, this is 3. That 3 is not going to round that up. So it's going to be a 3%. We started at 60. We got to 62. So it got bigger. So that means it's a 3% increase. So if you got that one right, great job. Let's move on to problem 12. Problem 12 states that Arthur's dog, Shep, used to weigh 158 pounds. The vet put him on a diet and he lost 13% of his weight. To the nearest pound, how much does Shep weigh now? Okay, so to figure this out, we're going to start with 158 pounds. And we're going to multiply it by 13% in the form of a decimal. So we're going to move this over 2 places to the left, which means we end up with 0.13. And that's where we're going to multiply it by, 0.13. So over to the side, I'm going to go 158 times 0.13. And I go 3 times 8 is 24. Write the 4, carry the 2. 3 times 5 is 15, plus 2 is 17. Write the 7, carry the 1. 3 times 1 is 3, plus 1 is 4. Then I'm going to write a 0 in the ones place because I'm moving on to the tens place. I go 1 plus 1 times 8 is 8. 1 times 5 is 5. 1 times 1 is 1. And then I add 4 plus 0 is 4. 8 plus 7, 7 plus 8 is 15. Write the 5, carry the 1. 4 plus 5 is 9, plus 1 is 10. Write the 0, carry the 1. 1 plus 1 is 2. Since I'm multiplying decimals, I need to count up the decimal places. There's 1, 2 places. So that means I'm going to move over 1, 2. So my answer ends up being 20.54. So that's how many pounds Shep lost. So if I want to find his weight now, I need to go 158 minus the amount that he lost, which was 20.54 pounds. I'm going to add the decimal here and zeros for those places. And then I'm just going to subtract. I need to borrow from this 8, making that a 7, this a 9, and that a 10. 10 take away 4 is 6. 9 take away 5 is 4. I drop down the decimal. 7 take away 0 is 7. 5 take away 2 is 3, and then 1 drops down. So Shep now weighs a whopping, to the nearest pound. This 4 does not round that up, so it would just be 130 pounds. So there you go, that's what Shep weighs. If you got that right, great job. Let's go ahead and work on problem 13. Problem 13 states the number of volunteers rose from 47 on Monday to 64 on Tuesday. What is the percent increase to the nearest tenth of a percent? Okay, so the first thing we need to determine is what is the amount of change. So to do that, we're just going to subtract the two numbers, 64 minus 47. The 4 is not big enough, so I need to borrow from the 6, making that a 5 and not a 1. 14 take away 7 is 7. 5 take away 4 is 1. So the amount of change is 17 over the original amount, which is 47, multiplied by 100. Now, when I'm looking at this, there's nothing easy to reduce or anything like that. So I'm just going to go ahead and put this one in my calculator. So here we go. Let's try it out. We have press on again, press on one more time. Okay, then I'm going to clear out. I'm going to go 17 divided by 47 and then hit enter. I get that answer, and then I'm going to multiply it by 100. And what I end up with is 36.17021277. So this states that I need to, what is the percent increase to the nearest tenth of a percent? So what I have here, this equals 36.17. To the nearest tenth, this is the tenths place, so I need to round, I need to look at this one. This is a 5 or bigger, so that means it's going to round this 1. This 7 is going to round this 1 up to a 2. So I end up with a 36.2%. And I started with 47, and now it's going to 64, so it's getting bigger. So that means it's a 36.2% increase. So if you got that one right, wonderful, spectacular job. Okay, on to problem 14, the last one. 14 says Coretta's bowling average decreased from 158 to 133. What is the percent decrease to the nearest tenth of a percent? Okay, well, first we need to figure out the amount of change. So I'm going to go 158 minus 133. I subtract these two. I have 8 minus 3, which is 5. 5 take away 3, which is 2. And 1 take away 1, which is 0. So I have 25 over the original amount, which is 158, multiplied by 100. Well, I'm just going to go ahead and put this in my calculator. So I'm going to clear it out. I'm going to go move it over here. I'm going to go 25 divided by 158 equals 0.158227849. I'm going to multiply it by 100 because that's what it says here. Multiply it by 100. Hit enter. And I end up with 15.8227%. It keeps going, but I'm just going to leave it at that. 15.227%. Now, the problem says, what is the percent decrease to the nearest tenth of a percent? So this is the nearest tenth of a percent. I need to look here to the right. This 2 is not a 5 or above, so it does not round that up. So the answer is 15.2%, and the original was 158, and it got smaller, so it's a percent decrease. So if you got all of those right, Yoke and Mashta, you did a great job, and we will see you next time. Bye-bye.